进行第2场演讲。大会邀请到国立成功大学高启教授担任主持人，让我们以热烈的掌声欢迎主持人。
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. We now begin our second session. Let's give a warm welcome to Chi Gao.
科学讲了很多我们这个关于科学跟宗教的东西那我们今天就提到这个关于道家的传统的道家的思想。那我们天地教有很大的一部分，我们师尊讲的东西都是源自于我们道家的思想那么他一再这个强调这个宗教最后一定要跟科学有那个结合。我们这个文章里面有很多是从事科学的，包括我自己也是学科学的。那师尊当时找我来，他说我就是要找一个学科学的来研究我们天地教的教义。他主要的目标就是要希望能够宗教跟科学的结合。他说19世纪以来，宗教跟科学的分裂，宗教跟科学本来是相容的。但是进到19、20世纪以后，宗教跟科学分裂，分裂了以后，这个科学就像一条不受拘束的一匹野马所以把我们人类带入到，从好的讲是一个科学昌明的时代，但是从另外一个方面讲，把我们带入到一个物欲横流的时代所以我们因为带入到物欲横流的时代，我们20世纪变成发生了2大世界大战有第1次世界大战，还有第2次世界大战。我们打完了以后，这个是在人类历史上从来没有世界大战，但是进入到20世纪以后，我们人类爆发了2次世界大战。2次世界大战打完以后，接着形成了美苏核武对抗，要把我们全部世界毁灭掉，用核武器全部毁灭掉。所以我们天地教就是在这个危机之下希望能够挽救世界的人类毁灭浩劫所以这个根源的地方就是宗教跟科学的分裂。所以韩进老师提出来，这个宗教跟科学一定要结合起来我们这个科学家一定要开始向这个不只是有形的宇宙，还有像无形的宇宙去进行来研究，把这个宇宙的真理能够透过种种的方式把它呈现在我们人类的这个眼前希望扩大我们人类的心胸所以希望能够让宗教的教化力量能够落实在我们每个人的心里面所以我们这个是过去一直在努力的一个方向。那我们今天请到了几位西方的学者他是研究中国的道家思想，非常不简单而且有几位也是从事想要把道家思想跟我们的科学其中有一位是想要介绍我们这个极端的气候，所以这个是我们天地教也很关心的一件事情。人类进入到21世纪以后，我们发现整个的世界变了一个很大的变化就是极端的气候对我们人类的产生一个很大的威胁所以这个是很值得我们大家一起来研究。在我们的祈祷词回向文里面，也希望要能够其中有回向文怎么充分讲一下希望能够化解我们这个天灾人祸极端气候，希望我们的人心能够恢复我们的这个传统的道德思想那我们今天第一位请到的是来自于美国 波士顿大学宗教学系的荣誉教授，因为他现在目前已经从这个学校退休了，但是还是在这个学校担任荣誉教授。目前他专心从事这个道家思想的研究这位教授是Professor Livia Kohn 那他是出生在德国，然后是德国的波昂大学宗教学系毕业。那他的著述非常的多，大部分都是跟中国的道家思想有关。一共有我这算了一下，大概有30几本书有的是他自己写作，有的是他跟别人合作然后他不但就是从事道家思想的研究，那他自己也是在这个从事自我修炼自我修持所以他是有这个自我修持功夫的一位学者那他今天的讲题是，今天的讲题是有书上面没有就是说从当代的西方心理学来讲庄子的至乐非常这个高兴向我们大家一起来欢迎
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. I'm very happy to be here, and I'm very grateful to the organizers for inviting me to this important event. And I'm happy to share with you some research I've been doing on Zhuangzi and perfect happiness in relation to Western psychology. Now, the Zhuangzi from the very beginning. Good. It's chapter 18 in the book of Zhuangzi talks, the title is Perfect Happiness, and it talks, right in the beginning of the chapter, it asks a very central question, in this world, is there such a thing as perfect happiness? Which I think is a pretty important question, and one that has been asked by philosophers and thinkers for many thousands of years. Is it possible to live to the fullest in this body? If so, what should we do? What should we rely on? What is best to pursue? What path better to abandon? What should we delight in? And what should we detest? Now from here, Zhuangzi, in both this chapter and in some couple of other places, speaks about what it is that ordinary people do and how it is really not the way to pursue perfect happiness. So for one thing, people think of happiness as reaching a very high place, of being successful, of having climbed a great mountain, of being way up there. They think of happiness as having a great house, with lots of space and a fancy swimming pool and, nice garden and all those sort of luxuries that come with fancy living. They think of happiness as having a lot of food, going to banquets and being able to eat as much as you want and enjoy all the different kinds of food. They think of happiness. Oh, you're in my way. They think of happiness as having a vacation on the beach, of you know, relaxing, being under palm trees. This is sort of the stuff that advertisements are made of. This is what ordinary people, you know, model that kind of happiness thing, of having a cruise ship, of going on a cruise and getting away from everything and being on these big boats and where you have more restaurants than you can count, or having a lot of money. So those are things that people in the world consider perfect happiness. And Zhuangzi acknowledges all this, and he realizes that. But then he says, going too fast, conventional happiness is that the things people consider in the world, consider today as most valuable, are those things we just looked at. Wealth, position, vigor, and a sense of being good at something. The things that make them happy are physical comfort, rich taste, beautiful clothes, lovely colors, and great music. On the other hand, they detest poverty, low status, early death, and crime. Now, this is sort of the situation we're faced with, and Zhuangzi says, well, that's sort of what people think, but it's not really true. He then says that this wealth also causes great suffering, and that people make themselves sick. First, they try and they run after things, after outside validation and outside material goods, but then they accumulate so much stuff they don't even know what to do with it. And then they have to take care of it, they have to store it, and they have to worry about it. And then they get scared that somebody will come and steal it, and they have to install an alarm system for it. So it continues to be very frustrating. So however dedicated they are to this particular kind of lifestyle, whatever happiness they're trying to get at is coming from the outside. It's not coming from themselves. And by the same time, by the same token, people slave day and night to get a good job, to get a high position, to get into the executive suite. But once they get there, they keep worrying constantly about whether they're good at their job, and they have to constantly fill in those job review things to prove that they're worthy. And again, the validation of their life, of their success, is not from the inside, it's an outside validation. So what people value in life is a beautiful face, good hair, tall stature, and very conscious courage, skill, and vigor. They follow the current, but all these kinds of things cause you trouble. What he says is pursuing any kind of happiness or fulfillment outside of yourself is really a huge drag. That's he says. It's very difficult. So it makes you abject and subservient if you have to keep following the current fashion. If you have a lot of wisdom and insight, if you have to get involved with a lot of things outside, if you have a lot of courage and enterprise, other people will resent you a lot. They say, oh, we don't like this person, he has too much initiative. And if you have lots of righteousness and you have social responsibility, then before you know it, you're on more committees than you can shake a stick at. And you're like really busy, and you have all this responsibility. So all these things, they are available to you. You can go after them. You can even be successful with them, but they have their price. He also lists 6 evils, which is in a little more detail in your package in the text. He says that people who go after things are overwhelmed by sounds and sights. They have too much good food and drink, and so they forget themselves in the greater scheme of things, and so they end up being very confused. They drown in energies and passions. They're suffering because they have too much things going on. They have too much stuff, so they're never fulfilled or at peace. They are addicted to chasing after profit. If they have too many things, they have to take care of them. And so once they have too many things, they start to be worried about losing them. So this is the current situation, and it's all pretty miserable. A lot of the texts, these passages are there to wake people up and to show them a mirror of what their behavior is. People will recognize themselves in one or the other of these characteristics. The answer for Zhuangzi is to connect to Tao. So to see yourself as an individual being that is, however, has energy centers within the body, an aura of energy around him, and is connected to the greater universe in all these different dimensions. So you're part of this interconnected network, sort of along the lines of the presentation we were listening to last night. One of the key factors in the practice or in the is the attitude of non-action. Non-action is a sense of personal harmony in which the actions flow freely. So a lot of the there, where? None. There. Good. So non-action is sort of, a lot of times it's associated with water. And it's both the still water of the pond, so you're like in your own self being like still water is resting. But even as the water is like, it seems to be still, there's always some subtle kind of movement in the water. And at the same time it is flowing naturally, flowing freely from one's own spontaneous inclination, one's own spontaneous inner tendencies, without the need for extended conscious deliberation. So you don't really have to consciously make a decision to do X or to Y or to do Y, because you are naturally inclined in one direction or the other, and there's no real inner struggle going on. So there's an inner peace, an inner harmony, and actions and attitudes and connections flow naturally out of your spontaneous inclination. Non-action is the state in which things unfold and develop of their own accord. It is a way, an attitude, a state of mind, a way of being in the world that allows you to align with naturalness and the natural flow of things. Yeah. Here's another good definition. I already did that. State of mind free from something. Okay, we just did that. Next one. Here's some translations for non-action. There's a lot of them. This is just a selection. Essentially, every person who's written about Zhuangzi, and also, of course, non-action is a big deal in the Tao Te Ching and in some other early sources. So anybody who's ever written about it has come up with their own translation. Here's a few that are maybe noteworthy. Trying without trying. So it's like you're continuously doing things, putting yourself forth, but you're not really having this tension of effort as you're doing it. It's action-centered spirituality, which means you're bringing your spirit into everything that you do. You're acting without artifice, so you're completely natural and your own true self as you're doing it. Now, non-action has been interpreted on the political, personal, and spiritual planes already in the ancient Chinese documents and then again in modern literature and modern reviews. So politically, it means that the ruler is in a position to let things go, to relax, to just allow the universe to do its thing, and to let people and beings transform themselves and do what they know how to do best without a lot of interference. So non-action on the political plane does have a program built into it that requires things like personal liberty, freedom to the people, where you really are able to develop in your own way without having the government interfere. On the more personal level, non-action needs to be in a state of non-duality, to not be divided. Oh, you know, should I do this, or should I do that, or should I go here, or should I go there? Or, you know, I have so much time, should I go for more money or more food? So those are some of the questions you don't have anymore. You're just centered in yourself, and the universe will present the next thing to do, and and it'll flow naturally. Flowing and natural are two key terms here. On the spiritual level, you get one step further, where you're opening yourself to the inflow of spirit, of God, of the universe, and allow the universe and God to flow through you and to manifest in your thoughts and actions. Another major concept in the Zhuangzi that expresses closely connected to perfect happiness is the idea of free and easy wandering. And you're all familiar with the Xiao Yao Yo, and it's the chapter, the title of chapter 1, and the Zhuangzi starts with this. And we do have, from looking at the chapter and at other passages, the term occurs many times in the text. We can distinguish two different levels of this, a more concrete level and a more spiritual level. On the more concrete level, it is a form of traveling, a form of being at ease within the world, of being able to fulfill different roles in different situations, of adapting to the environment. You're still within the constraints of society, nature, and relationships, but they do not really impact you. They do not really tie you down. You are free within the world. The translation of Yo is swim, float, and wander. So we have wandering is one, floating is another one, and of course the word Yo even today means swimming. So you're like the life currents are like a water, a gentle stream, a river that carries you and you float along with it. It means personal independence. So despite all your interconnectedness that you still have as you live in society, you are independent as a person. There is a political dimension of liberty in there, as I already mentioned. If you're needing to flow in certain directions, you can't have the government tell you, no, you can't go this way. In some interpretations, and there's a whole school of thought that puts Zhuangzi into the corner of being a hermit. I personally don't believe that, but there is a very strong school, and there is indications for that. Zhuangzi rejects political involvement. Zhuangzi prefers to be by himself. Zhuangzi wants to sort of get away. And there are a number of passages that are openly critical to social involvement. So being a hermit might be an option. It might be a form of Yo. It might be a form of free and easy wandering. But not everybody's made out to be a hermit. So some people are more hermit-like than others. In the more spiritual level, free and easy wandering means to be at ease in a more transcendental fashion, in a more spiritual, religious kind of way. You go beyond the common boundaries, you rest beside heaven and earth, you're outside of the four seasons, you're connected to infinity. So that is a spiritual form of free and easy wandering, where you're sort of ecstatic, energy-based, heaven-given soul being comes forth. And here we have words such as flow, relax, and exalt. So there is an exaltation, a height of spirit that comes out. It means being a continuous part of the changes, to have a sense of inner freedom that may or may not have anything to do with social liberty. There's a personal freedom here that comes from the spiritual level, and that may even manifest under politically restrictive situations. And you are, some people, again, just as some people interpret the worldly version of this as becoming a hermit, so some people, that's already in the Chinese Middle Ages, when the poets were interpreting Zhuangzi as a way to get away from it all and the form of ascesis. Within this framework, these are the happy fish, in case you didn't notice. Everybody has their own way of being, and so within the world, which is overall beautiful, gorgeous, and beneficent, you can play different kinds of roles and have different kinds of positions. Zhuangzi strongly emphasizes the power of uniqueness, and his ethical system is what we call an ethics of difference. where different perspectives are equally valid and are honored equally. And this is an actual quotation. When fish are in water, they live. When people are in water, they die. Being fundamentally different in nature, they like and dislike different things. And this does not just only applies to fish and people, it applies to every single person or all the other beings on the planet. So each individual person has their own unique nature. Each individual person has their own likes and dislikes and their own tendencies to things that they're particularly good at. So self-realization in concrete terms means something different to everybody. So you cannot prescribe one way to self-realization. It's not if you do X, you'll be realized yourself. No. Each individual person will have to be doing their own thing. The sages of old never expected uniformity in ability or sameness in activity. So we cannot expect people to be the same. We can offer them similar, equal opportunity by creating conditions that are conducive to self-realization, but we cannot expect them to do the same thing in all. Here's the big bird and the little bird. So for this reason, right in the beginning of the Zhuangzi, we have the story about the big bird and the little bird. And each of these beings is their own unique being. They have their own unique nature. They do whatever is particularly right for them. And the problem is that a lot of people in the world, they may find themselves being little birds, but they really want to be big birds. And it doesn't work that way. If you're not born with the right wingspan, you're not going to be a big bird. So people need to recognize what they're good at. And there are certain things that, you know, always know the story of the frog in the well. There are certain things that smaller beings, apparently smaller beings, are very good at that big beings are not good at. So the big turtle can't even get his foot in the well, whereas the frog has his whole world there. And there's no value attached to it. It's just he's happy where he is, and the turtle is happy, and the big bird is happy. It's realizing where you are geared to and what you're good at and what makes you positive in life. So here we have, coming to this part of the Zhuangzi section, concluding the Zhuangzi section of this talk, this is perfect happiness. It's living all life as a unified flow experience. So you're happy in whatever life presents you, and you are able to deal with all the different parts of life in a positive way. It is the intrinsic quality of the ongoing process of wondering. So in other words, happiness is the way you feel as you are in that wandering, in that flow process, which is predicated or depends on or supported by an attitude of non-action. So this is how I see those three fit together. Now this is Zhuangzi again here. Perfect happiness is being free from the need to be happy, and perfect accomplishment is being free from having to accomplish anything. So rather than looking for a goal and trying to be successful in that goal, you just do whatever you do best and what you enjoy, and then accomplishment will come naturally. Now we're moving into Western psychology. This was the first part of the talk. There are a couple of places, there's a few more actually than the ones I have in this paper, but there are a few places where Western psychology connects to Zhuangzi. The most obvious and the clearest one is Csikszentmihalyi's concept of flow. And he wrote a book in the 70s, which is called Beyond Boredom and Anxiety. And what he's talking about is that people, as you're doing something, this is where you are doing things, or you're doing things. And as you're doing things, whatever the activity may be, it can be an activity that is not particularly interesting or challenging to you, as a result of which you get bored. So there's not enough stimulation there, there's boredom. Or you can have a deadline, and whatever it is you're doing is a little bit beyond your current skill level, and there's a fair amount of pressure, and so you end up having anxiety. So here's your skill, here's your challenge, and right in the middle, between boredom and anxiety, but sometimes getting a little closer to anxiety, sometimes getting a little closer to boredom, you're in this state of flow. And so flow means that you're right there. You're fully focused, the activity is engaging, you're really into it, you're doing it, you're getting a lot of satisfaction, fulfillment out of it, you're not bored, and you're not nervous about the outcome. And then this is a similar chart showing the same thing. Here. Flow, according to Csikszentmihalyi, is described as the optimal experience. So as you're living your life, there are all kinds of different experiences you have. The optimal level of experience is flow, because you're really 100% there, and you're really enjoying yourself, and giving it your best, and you're right there. He also calls it autotelic. Autotelic means it has no goals beyond itself. Telos is Greek for goal, your purpose, your goal, and auto means of itself. So the activity is its own goal. The classic flow experiences are usually in games, play, games, musical things, things of that sort. And he has 7 characteristics, or 8 characteristics that Mike Csikszentmihalyi describes to have a flow experience. And what he says essentially is that everybody, in everybody's life, we have flow experiences. It's something that happens to us. Little kids have it, growing up you have it, now you have it, it happens. But people tend to come in and out of the flow experience. And these are the characteristics, if you want to set yourself up for one, those are the things you need to be doing. There has to be a chance of successful completion, so the task has to be relatively limited. You have to have also clearly the limited goals, that sort of goals with that. Your goals have to be clear. You get very good immediate feedback, which is true for a lot of games. If you hit the ball in a certain direction and it goes outside the court, you know that you didn't do too well. The ability to concentrate fully. You have to forget your everyday, ordinary life concerns. So it's very difficult to play a good play of tennis while you're making a shopping list in your head. There has to be a sense of control. You're not concerned for yourself at this time. Again, it's one of those things where you don't really worry whether your nail polish is coming off. You're really in the game at this point, so you're not concerned for yourself. And a lot of times there's an altered sense of time. And I don't know if you've experienced this when you do things when you're like totally involved in something, and then all of a sudden somebody says lunch, and say, no way. This is very fast. So your sense of time is altered because you're so absorbed in things. And then also in games, often it's like it's the second inning. It's not 10:30. You know, you're not counting by ordinary time. You're counting by the time of the game. Okay, I want to say something else to this. People have discussed. There are two things I want to say. Csikszentmihalyi himself, in his book on flow, and his big book on flow was published in 1990, and it's called Flow, talks about Zhuangzi. So he was aware of Zhuangzi, and he himself identifies Xiaoyaoyou as a form of flow experience. He says, hey, people 2,400 years knew about this. Zhuangzi writes about it. This is it. So that's one thing I want to mention. The other thing is that people have discussed it, and they said, okay, for Csikszentmihalyi, you have to have all these different, criteria on how to get in this. It has to be limited, it has to be this, it has to be that. Zhuangzi's really different. Zhuangzi's like, hey, relax, and here it is. But if you read Csikszentmihalyi a little closer, and you read especially then also his later works, he starts talking about flow as a mode of living life all the time, of being in flow, 24 hours a day. And so, by the same token, we get closer to what Zhuangzi is talking about. It's realizing yourself, being fully yourself, being engaged with what you're doing, and living, turning all life into a continuous flow experience. So there is a fair amount of closeness in their understanding. Now, a second way in which Zhuangzi A second way in which Zhuangzi is being applied in Western psychology today is in connection with stress. And you may be aware of the fact that stress is like pervasive in Western society. It is very damaging to people's health. And the statistics say, which I think I have here, the statistics say that the American Institute of Stress estimates that 75 to 90% of all medical visits, of all visits that people do to their medical doctors, are essentially stress-related. So that's 75 to 90%, that's a lot. So you have stress as a pervasive problem in Western society. The discussion of stress goes back to a psychologist called Han-Ching, and he distinguishes three different kinds of stress. He's the one who coined the word eustress. Eustress is positive. It's a good thing. It's essentially what Csikszentmihalyi talks about when he talks about flow. Eustress means you want to be engaged, you want to be challenged, you want to be active, you want to be moving out, things want to be, positive. So you don't just want to be sitting there doing nothing. It's not going to release your stress. It's not going to really help you. You need to be, people are made to be active, to move, and to do things. And there's a lot of positive challenges in life that give you stimulation, and that's eustress. Now, this stress, or stress properly, is the flight or fight response. That's a biological mechanism. Stress is an elementary biological mechanism that all living organisms possess, all the way from the plant to the highest complicated nervous system. And essentially it is a built-in response to a threat to survival. So if something comes at you and you're being threatened, there's a physical, somatic, and mental response to this. And the first thing that happens is your abdominal muscle contracts, and that shortens your breathing. You cannot breathe fully into your abdomen if there is a threat to survival. So your breathing changes. Then it's tight breathing, and then your adrenaline kicks in, so you become very strong and very enduring. So a lot of the energy in your body goes into the extremities, into the legs so you can run, flight, or into the arms so you can punch somebody, fight. So flight or fight. So your extremities become very strong. Your intestinal organs shut down. There's no time to have a nice little bathroom break while you're fighting a tiger. So you have to, your whole digestive system shuts down. Your thinking goes into a mode that is called primal thinking, which is very fixed and rigid. So it's me or him, it's run or fight, it's this way or that way. It's like total black and white, and it's very focused. So your brain goes into this overdrive that becomes very alert, very sharp. Your heart rate increases because your breathing is shallow. You have there's no hunger, no thirst because your intestinal system has shut down, and you're sort of running for your life. That's stress. Now, stress in itself is a necessary response. It's a necessary mechanism for survival. We need to be able to go into this mode. What we don't need is to be in it all the time. And that's the third form, which is called chronic stress. Chronic stress is people who, and that is very common, that's the real big issue in modern society, is that your mind gets programmed in such a way that you think that not catching the cab, or not getting enough food, or not doing whatever, not having any of the successes that we lined up in the beginning, any of those outside happiness indicators, is like as threatening to you as an attack by a primeval tiger. And so people are in this chronic stress response. They never breathe deeply. They always have this heartbreak thing. Their intestines aren't working properly. They constantly think in black and white. I have to get this, otherwise the world's gone for them. So there's this constant stress response. And what's worse is that people get used to it, and they think that's a great thing. They're so used to being in this kind of stress mode that any time they sort of start to come down from it and relax, they start looking for the next crisis so they can run after something else. And if they're not no next crisis coming up, then they start taking drugs that enhance the adrenaline response, such as caffeine, and then put themselves into this artificial stress. And that's where you get all those negative health effects. Now, Zhuangzi, according to Robert Han-Ching, who's been using Zhuangzi in this context, very clearly describes what we call primal thinking in the Qibulun, the second chapter. It's all about right and wrong, this and that, black and white, fixed mind kind of thinking. The Zhuangzi talks about you, which is translated usually as anxiety or worry, and it's also interpreted slightly differently, but this particular psychologist, and I think I have his name, Robert who works in Hawaii, he interprets yo as meaning stress. And then he says that Zhuangzi offers cognitive, social, somatic, and practical methods and a vision. Robert Sante, there's his name. Good, I knew I had it right there. He offers methods on all these different levels to change people out of that chronic stress response. We want people to be in eustress and to be able to experience stress as flight or fight if survival necessitates it. We don't want them to become mental kind of vegetables. Cognitively, Zhuangzi talks about restructuring thinking. So you're thinking globally. There's something called skepticism and perspectivism in the Zhuangzi, where instead of thinking black and white, you think, well, wait a second, if I look at it from this angle, it actually doesn't look so bad. Or, well, let me appreciate your perspective on things. So you start looking at things from multiple perspectives, and that takes away that intensity of that primal division. Socially, Zhuangzi himself rejects office and suggests that people take a big step back with regard to having an office, having status, having wealth. Some of the passages we cited earlier, how wealth and all those things create difficulty for you. So once you reevaluate your social position, do I really need all this? And do I really want that much status? Do I really want to get involved with yet another something? The amount of stress just releases because the outside social pressures are less. Somatically, which means in terms of the body, he talks about breathing exercises. He says the perfected man breathes all the way to his heels. Recommends deep abdominal breathing, and the simple fact is that it is physiologically impossible to be stressed and breathe deeply at the same time. Can't do it. So breathing breaks. So at certain times in your day when you know there's nothing much else to do, like you're sitting in traffic and there's a red light, or you're at the bus stop, or you're just waiting for something to happen, you say, oh, wait a second, here's a chance I can breathe. And so you take this, just a few conscious, very deep, intense breaths that really work your diaphragm so your abdomen gets engaged. You just do this for maybe a minute or so, and you will get out of that stress response. And people have shown that this lasts for at least 3 to 4 hours. So if you put like a regular breathing practice into your life 3 times a day, it is much more difficult for you to get into the traditional stress response. He also wants you to still the mind, to calm the mind, to be relaxed in your mind, to let things go, to let the mind just flow on its own. In terms of practices, you're familiar with those. Zhuangzi talks about the fasting of the mind. Don't listen with your ears, listen with your mind. Don't listen with your mind, listen with your chi. So you become more aware of the energetic patterns rather than using your senses and your conscious mind to work with reality. And then, of course, in oblivion, you're letting go of all your traditional identity. You're really shifting into a more cosmic mode of being, which leads us to the ideal, the holistic experience of the self, and this feeling of universal energy flowing through the body. So the Zhuangzi on all these different levels provides various kinds of remedies for the stress response and allows people to have a freer and more relaxed life. Now, from here we move on to energy psychology, which is the very latest in psychological development in the States. Energy psychology is only about 10 or so years old. It's very recent. One of the representatives, Gary Zukov, talks about authentic power, which is something where you're really shifting here. In the flow experience, he was looking at people being between, boredom and anxiety and living their lives in society, and so say, okay, here's how you can change your social situation and your physical situation to get into a flow experience. So this is like your outer thing. Even with the stress response, well, here is how you can change physiologically your breathing, and then it gets you out of the stress response. So these previous approaches, they're coming from the outside in, they're symptom-oriented, and they're starting from the negative. Energy psychology, and there's different branches of it. There's a branch that is also symptom-oriented. But in this particular branch of energy psychology, you're shifting. You're no longer symptom-oriented. You're starting with the question, what is right within you? Where is the healthy center within you? And then you're working it from the inside out. So rather than looking at what's wrong and trying to fix it, you're starting with what is good. So you're looking at authentic power. That's the description he has. It feels good. It's doing what you're supposed to be doing. It's fulfilling. Your life is filled with meaning and purpose. You have no doubts. You have no fears. You're happy to be alive. This is awfully close to Zhuangzi's perfect happiness. And the Xiaoyao Yoga description you have. Everything you do is joyful, perfect happiness. Everything exciting, you're not worried about something wrong, making a mistake or failing. You do not compare yourself with others. This is closely echoes Zhuangzi's description of the perfected, the Zhenren. The perfected sleeps without dreaming and wakes without worrying. You can make a mistake without feeling bad about it. You can be successful without feeling very boastful. So we have an echo here, but it's the power within that you're focusing on rather than the symptoms of a particular situation. David Hawkins, who is a major psychiatrist and also major representative of this kind of modern latest psychology, and a kinesiologist, he works in kinesiology a lot, has the following basic truths that are very much echoing what Zhuangzi would agree with. So those are positive descriptions of how you would want to look at the world when you're starting with the attitude of authentic power. Everything in the human domain is transient and temporary. Nothing can be really owned. All relationships are temporary. Everything ultimately belongs to God or Tao or the universe. So you are just a steward, a temporary manager of life, of the things that are given to you. Everything ultimately belongs to the universe. Sentient beings live by faith and experience. Ownership and relationships are stewardships. I just said that. You focus on alignment rather than attachment or involvement. So rather than trying to grab things and attach to them, you focus on aligning with them, on going along with things, and you cling to principles rather than things or objects, and you live with courage and dignity, connecting to power. And power is also a key. Inner power is a key concept of David Hawkins, who says that power arises from principle and is associated with supports the significance of life and appeals to your inner nature that is positive and noble. An expansion of this was developed by Dr. Edwin Carlson in a new system called Core Health, which has only been a few years old. And he says that you can experience authentic power or true inner power, your true, what Zhuangzi would call de, or virtue, which is your internal potential of unfolding, in something he calls a perfect moment, which is a time of childhood when everything feels all right with life, and the world is experienced, and it's a moment of experience oneness, and any of those events people have that they remember when they felt completely whole. And it can be just like a childish activity, it can be a nature thing, it can be something social. When people are in their perfect moment, we light up from the inside out. So you can mentally go back to this moment of inner wholeness. Yes, thank you. Being in our perfect moment, our world is whole and our energy is complete. This is when you are in authentic power. Authentic power manifests when you are in your perfect moment and you are energetically whole. You're perfectly fine internally, no matter what the world is doing on the outside. And this is your starting point for creating the kind of life that you really want, for opening into the universal flow, for letting go of all those artificial forms of happiness that we talked about in the beginning. The vision of the universe and of the self that comes with this is that the Tao is the underlying force of creation. The universe is holographic, so all parts are mirrored in all else. Chi is the material aspect and the life energy. It's like in quantum physics, the quanta that are both waves and particles, yin and yang. This flows in the alternating rhythm of yin and yang, which in modern physics is expressed in wave interference. So a lot of these, the energy psychology people work with systems that come out of traditional religions, such as Taoism and Indian yoga, but they also are congruent with the particles, with quantum physics. Their main energy centers are in the head, the chest, and the abdomen, which match the brain in modern science, the thymus gland, and the belly brain. And I really want to get to this last point, which is the biology of belief. This is where science supports energy psychology. And the person in charge here is a guy called Bruce Lipton. The book is called The Biology of Belief. And he says that the body consists of trillions of cells, and that each individual cell receives and sends signals through its membrane. And they have receptors, and receptors are emotions and mental attitudes and thoughts. Our conscious mind and our emotional mind influence what our cells are doing. The effectors generate energy, regulate cells, and synthesize or break down molecules. Here's your human cell, and it's the membrane that is the one that gives the connection to the rest of the world. Now the cells, once they receive information, essentially have two choices. They can be either in protection or in growth. If they are in growth, then they continue to renew themselves. They're smiling, they're happy, they renew themselves, they're growing, and they continue to have these, cooperate with the other cells in a powerful community. When they go into protection, which they do when there is a stress response, then they shut down, and that's important for flight and fight, but if they shut down over a long period, they eventually go into stages, and then disease starts to develop. So in other words, the image of disease, why we get sick, is not because we're genetically programmed for it, but because of the way we either turn on or turn off our genetic programming in the way we keep talking to ourselves. Energy tracks at however many miles per second. The impulses have an immediate effect. So once you start changing your thinking, which you do in your meditation practice, once you start smiling at yourselves and encouraging them to be active, the effect is immediate. Energy shifts immediately. And 93% of all ailments and all conditions, physical conditions, are non-physical. Only 7% are really physical. And I think, yes, this is the end. So perfect happiness, let me go to the last slide first. Perfect happiness is, one more. Let's go to the very last one. So perfect happiness is the, in the Chinese system, the things that are making us manipulate our cell reactions are our emotions, our will and intention, and our spirit. And so perfect happiness comes, emotions, will, and intention, when you let go and release the emotions, release the conscious intention, or start thinking very positively and open yourself to the spirit. You rest in non-action, you activate your internal power, you open your heart, and you become one with the universal flow of Tao. Thank you very much.
非常谢谢Professor Kohn 的介绍，也是关于这个庄子的极乐思想。我们宗教也在讲这个追求这种极乐极乐，要我们师讲看破生死看破生死那他今天讲的还有从这个西方的很多的哲学思想家来谈论我们这个庄子的思想，我们也感觉到很惊讶，就是说还没想到还有这么多的西方这个哲学思想家，他们的思想可以这么接近的这个道家的思想其中有一位讲说，他说这个世界都不是属于我们的我们在这个世界都是暂时的所以这个跟我们天主教思想跟这个道家的思想都非常的接近那因为我们今天时间的关系我们没有办法去深入讨论。我们所有的讨论都是到今天的下午，还有明天的早上，所以大家有什么问题可以把它记录下来我们等到这个今天下午或者明天早上之后再一起来讨论。好，那非常谢谢Professor Kohn的这个演讲精彩的演讲。先息20分钟到这个到10点。